In the 1880s, there lived a man by the name of Henry Howard Holmes, or more infamously known as H.H. Holmes. As a student, he was unusually intelligent and had a strong fascination with death. Some would say that this fascination fueled his desire to go to medical school. Lo and behold, he was accepted to the University of Michigan Medical School. He was broke and needed money to make ends meet, so instead of getting a job, he made it his mission to steal cadavers from the school laboratory. You may be wondering what type of business he was doing to make profits off these bodies. He went through the whole process of first taking out insurance policies on these dead people, then disfiguring their bodies, and then finally staging their bodies as if they died from an accident. So he basically went through all of that to get money. When he passed his medical exams, he relocated to Chicago and worked at a pharmacy. Mysteriously, during the time he was working there, the owner died. Holmes, who was rather charming and good with his words, was able to convince the owner's wife to let him buy the drugstore. When this purchase was a success, she too went missing. It's up in the air what happened to these two individuals, but given how morbid and conniving Holmes was as a person, we can only assume he was responsible for their whereabouts. When I say Holmes was cunning, I mean he seriously was a man who was constantly 100 steps ahead of everyone around him. He was strategic and he was quick to act, managing to get whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. Being the owner of the pharmacy enabled him to also buy an empty lot across the street. In this empty lot, he planned and executed the design of a hotel. He had hired and subsequently fired many construction workers to build this building because he did not want anyone to understand how the building works. I'm telling you guys, in his mind, he was not only setting and acting on these goals, but he was also processing each tiny step along with each consequence. Being in his head alone would be a nightmare. So this hotel he made was known by the locals in the neighborhood as the Castle. It was a 3-story building with a very complex inner design. I'll delve into this aspect soon because it is mind-boggling. After the castle's complete construction, Holmes immediately began to send out flyers all over town to make everyone aware of its existence. He advertised various positions to attract as many people as possible, including jobs for young women, lodging, and even advertising himself as a wealthy man looking for a wife. Anybody who wanted to step into this building was required to have an insurance policy, including the guests, fiancés, and wives. He convinced all of them to make him the beneficiary by paying the premiums. When the annual World Fair was going on in Chicago, Holmes saw this as the best opportunity to lure the most people he can into this building while advertising it as lodging. Anyone who would enter the building suddenly was never seen coming out. What he did to what is thought to be 200 people was horrendous. He essentially designed his castle as a murder vault. There were more than 100 rooms that were soundproof and contained gas lines. The purpose of this design was so he could kill people by asphyxiation. Along with the equipped gas chambers, he also designed the building to have staircases that led to nowhere and chutes that led directly to the basement. In the basement, he designated it as his own laboratory and crematory, where he dissected the bodies that entered. He then stripped these bodies of their flesh and sold the skeletons to schools. If he didn't do that, he would get rid of the bodies by either cremating them or throwing them in acid. After the World Fair ended, Chicago was facing major economic decline, which forced Holmes to abandon the castle and venture out to various other states to commit more insurance scams along with more murders. He befriended a sidekick known as Benjamin Peitzel, who accompanied him in all these scams. Holmes, as we know now, doesn't have an ounce of humanity or empathy because he even convinced Peitzel to fake his own death to collect money, but then actually killed him using chloroform to make him unconscious and then burn his body with benzene. Subsequently, Holmes collected the money. During his insurance scam marathon, he had tricked another accomplice by the name of Marion Hedgepeth. Hedgepeth was furious that he didn't get any of the money and immediately reported Holmes to the police about his scam. The police chased Holmes and finally arrested him in Boston. Upon arresting him, they also investigated his castle in Chicago. They discovered various body parts that were so concisely chopped up into pieces, it was unclear how many people he murdered. Though they made a guesstimate that Holmes had killed up to 200 individuals. The authorities then investigated the other states Holmes fled to and found even more remains, including Peetzel's children. Holmes confessed to 28 murders, though investigators believe he committed much more. When he was caught, he said a very haunting confession, claiming, quote, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer. No more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing," end quote. With Holmes away from society, locals wanted to make his castle an attraction site, calling it the House of Horrors. Before anything can happen, though, the building mysteriously and eerily burned down into flames. Holmes was sentenced to death by hanging. On his last day, he ate some toast and drank some coffee. Then, as he was escorted out through the gallows, it was noted that Holmes was actually very quiet and very calm. As the executor placed the noose around his neck, Holmes muttered these last words, quote, "Take your time, old man. Don't bungle it." End quote. Hypocritically, prior to his death, he expressed concern that grave robbers will enter his grave and steal his corpse. He requested that they bury him 10 feet deep and have his body enclosed with cement. I find it odd that a man who clearly had no regards or boundaries when it came to any of his victims' bodies had a real concern about his own body. Though this entire case paints the textbook psychopath who only cares about himself. This case is just simply shocking, and I still can't comprehend how a person like this ever existed on this earth. How elaborate and how conniving he was, and how he utilized his medical background and fascination with death in the most horrific and lethal way possible. Can you imagine what his mind was like? I think the building he made symbolized his brain in a way, with all the loopholes, dead ends, traps, and killing machines. He was a highly opportunistic man who was driven by his own desires of money and death, establishing a literal career out of killing people. I really want to hear your thoughts about this case because, in my opinion, Holmes is the scariest serial killer in America. I look forward to reading your guys' comments, and please like, share, and subscribe for more interesting content.